All right, it's 11 o'clock. Good morning, everybody. How are you guys doing? Good morning to everybody virtually too. Thanks for coming. Let me start with a quick prayer to get us started. Holy Father, thank you for so many blessings you've given us, but most importantly, the relationship that you have with us through your word, and just to teach us how to be more like you and understand your will, and in the end, what's best for us, even though it may not feel comfortable sometimes. Guide us today through this lesson that we learn things that we can use them. And I pray specifically for the Spirit to speak through me for your word. It's through your Son we pray. Amen. All right. Come on in. All right. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. This is session 5 for the Align course. It's going to be pursuing optimal returns and wise investing. Let me do a little housekeeping before I introduce myself real quick. First of all, if you've missed a session and you need to watch those online, let Ray Reed know. So her email address is right there. I don't know if that can be read online, but hopefully being on staff, you can find Ray's email address. Okay. Also, the books we've had for each of the sessions, Treasure Principle, Fools of Gold, Plastic Donuts, and today we're going to have The Genius of Generosity that we'll have for today. So pick those up on your way out. Please don't forget one per family. Okay. All right. Make sure that everybody is signed in that's here physically. For those online, please shoot Ray Reed a note that you have watched this online. Okay. This is what we've got here. All right. Okay. That's what we've got for that housekeeping. Okay. So my name is Daryl Dunn. I am not on the ministry staff. I do attend the Bentonville campus. I started here at Rogers actually right 3 months before COVID shut it down. And then they built the Bentonville campus and I jumped over there. So my background is not in seminary or ministry. So some of you guys may be walking circles around me, and that's okay. That's why we rely on people like Don to help me out to make sure we got correct interpretation. But what I do every day is financial planning, investment management. I'm a certified financial planner, certified private wealth advisor. I've been doing this for about 20 years now. So I love it. I've got a passion for it. I'm just very, very fortunate. There is a disclosure I've got to put out there. Number one, from the church's point of view, I'm not giving you investment recommendations. So if you go buy Bitcoin, don't blame me. It didn't come to the church. And then also for the firm I work for, which I'm not going to disclose, is same thing. I'm not here representing giving financial advice or investment advice. This is educational in nature. Okay. Let me think. Generally, I kind of like the back and forth with the questions. And this session generally has a lot of stuff in it. I'm not going to lie. It's packed with a lot. I'm going to have to run through it a little bit quicker than normal, okay? Because Don's got his session right after this. Most of the time, the session runs about an hour, hour 15, if we have just a handful of questions. If there's something that's on your mind, I'm going to stick around after Don's session, so feel free to approach me and ask questions also. Okay? And for those online, if you've got questions or you want to reach out to me, just connect with Ray or Don, and they'll give you my information. We'll be happy to help out. So cool. All right. Talked about the book. Good. Let's get started. All right. Session 5 in regards to where we're at. The previous 4 sessions are building up in regards to the basic philosophical thesis of where we're at in our mindset with money and riches and assets that God's blessed us with. We've talked about the benefits of work. What about income? What about debts? What about giving? Now we're going to be talking about the excess. So you're covering all of those things already. You're meeting your day-to-day finances. You've got a little bit extra after, working down the debts and after doing your giving. So that's where we're at today for our session. You probably have noticed we do not shy away from scripture in these slides. I help out with session 2. Sometimes there's a lot of scripture in those, which I love. That's the foundation where we're at. So let's see what Paul talks to Timothy in his first letter to set kind of a foundation for today. All right. So as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. Okay? So there's a lot of things to be pulled out of this, but Paul does a good job of packing a lot of words in a short amount of space, a lot of concepts. But three things to emphasize is this. First of all, it's going to be a cautionary tale. Okay. For those who have riches, is that don't lean upon that. They are uncertain. You guys probably remember earlier on in session 2, you touched on the parable of the seeds, and one of the items that Jesus talked about was the deceitfulness of riches. Okay, so here Paul is saying, hey, it's not just deceitful, but it's also uncertain. It can vaporize in a day, either due to things that you happen to do or your circumstances. So they rely on the certainty of God. Okay, so second item I see out of this is in regards to surety. So God provides us everything that we need. So think of it as a life of abundance as opposed to a life of scarcity. Okay? And then the last item is going to be in regards to encouragement. We see here is that we're encouraged to help others to do good. My personal definition of success is this. It's taking the talents and opportunities that God gives us to glorify God, further his kingdom, and serve the common good. Notice that's got nothing to do with how much money you make. That's got nothing to do with your status. It's what you're doing with your talents and opportunities to help other people out. Okay. Paul shares that here. All right. Let me pause real quick. I forgot to do one thing. I think most everybody's got this book. Is that correct? Okay. Online, I'm not sure if you have this book, but I have been told that some of you may have the old book, but Ray has given you the slide deck that I'm using here. So if by chance you don't, I apologize. There are some adjustments to this presentation compared to the old book. All right, sorry about the interjection. A couple other scriptures as kind of a foundation of touching on riches and assets, because what is it, about 2,300 verses in the Bible that touch on wealth and money and assets? That's a lot. It means that it is important to God where your heart's at. So let's see some principles that we have here. In Proverbs, it says, precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. So basically it's saying, hey, it's okay to have some in reserve. It's almost kind of unwise not to have anything in reserve. Now, let's be honest about it. We may have circumstances where we have to drain our emergency fund to fix the car or fix the air conditioning system. That happens. But on a regular basis, have things in reserve. It's okay to store stuff off to the side. Now, where it goes too far is when you start to hoard beyond maybe what you need. Another scripture in Proverbs, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. We probably heard stories of lottery winners that become broke within just a few years after receiving it. I personally witnessed some clients who have inherited hundreds of thousands of dollars and can spend it within a matter of months. It doesn't even take years sometimes. I mean, it's amazing how fast it can go down. But the back half of that, it says, gathers little by little will increase it. Think about it whenever you have saved over the span of weeks, months, or years for something, you appreciate it much, much more. Okay. Or you're saving in your own accounts over time, you just set it to the side and you kind of ignore it. I'm not saying forget it, but you ignore it, but it grows over time. Then it increases. Ecclesiastes is a good foundation for diversification and investing. I like this. We think in our modern age, we've got it all figured out, right? This stuff goes back centuries, and they had these concepts back then. Invest in 7 ventures, yes. In 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. Okay? So setting things aside, sometimes the tortoise beats the hare in regards to diversification. So these concepts aren't necessarily new. We're not going to go through the parable of the talents or the bags of gold, but the main idea that extracts from it is stewardship. Okay? Everybody in this room has been given some form of talent, some form of expertise, something, and God expects us to do something with that. Okay? Same to be said with what we have in regards to our wealth and assets is don't just put it under a mattress and just hope for the best. Do something with it. Like on the backside of Paul's scripture we just had, it's sometimes for the benefit of others to help further the kingdom. Okay. We're going to wrap back around to what we saw in session 2 in regards to stewardship, and God is watching. So Lucas says, so if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? Okay. All right. So it does matter what we do. Let's be intentional. That's what we say is the intentionality. All right. So there's our biblical foundation to get us started off. All right. Okay. I like thoughts and philosophies, but I'm a much, much more practical person. That's what I'm tasked to do every day is solve this problem. How can we practically get it knocked out? So some of the challenges we have today in one of the most affluent societies in the world is that 65% of Americans still live paycheck to paycheck. Okay. I know that sample size is not very large, but I've seen other studies and it bounces between 60 to 75%. I mean, it's a very common thing. Okay. Also, a little bit more than half of US adults can't afford $1,000 emergency expense. What we mean by that is that they're going to go into debt if something happens or they got to borrow from somebody. They don't have that emergency fund out there. So let's try to work on a process to be intentional about not falling into that trap. Okay. So let's move into the spectrum of saying what we don't have. Here's the question I get a lot from how do I stack compared to somebody else? How am I comparing? I've got some money saved up. How am I looking? All right. So I'll show you a survey that the Federal Reserve does on occasion. All right. I don't know if you guys can read that. If you can't, it's in your book. I think it's page 36, if I'm right. Is that right? 35. All right. Just about one page, close enough. But there's a table on there that breaks it down demographically by age. Okay. Now, words do matter on this slide. Notice it says average retirement savings. So the survey is focused on retirement type accounts. Think of like IRAs and 401ks. Okay. So it doesn't include the value of somebody's home or if they've got a business that they own. That is part of the survey, but it's in different numbers. Okay. So that's kind of a cheat sheet depending on where your age is, of just maybe on average where the rest of the United States is. Just out of curiosity, we threw that in there. All right, so how do we go about the planning process? And how do we set something in motion so we are intentional? All right, so first you got to define your goal. Then you've got to prioritize it. Okay? And then from there, you can create a savings plan to reach those. So defining the goal, what do we mean by that? Well, a lot of people say, well, I just want to grow my money. Well, it's not a clear definition of the goal. Let me give an example. A clear definition would be our first bullet point. I need to establish a $2,500 emergency fund or a $5,000 emergency fund, whatever it is. You know what the dollar amount is, okay? Sometimes you might want to put in time frame, such as you've got a retirement time frame saying, I want to retire by the time I'm 65, okay? The more numbers you can put to it, the more finite it is, it helps out, okay? Prioritizing is also very key, such as here, get that emergency fund set up. Don't worry about saving, for a second home or a car if you don't have that emergency fund. Okay. So you need to prioritize what's most important to you and what you need. Sometimes I'll have it where clients will prioritize their kids' college savings above their retirement. They'll work much longer than they will save for their kids because the idea is I can always, sorry, I got that backwards. You can always borrow for college, but you can't borrow for retirement. But they're saying, I don't care about that. I want to make sure my kids are taken care of. Other bullet points in regards to some definitions. Save enough for your 401k company match. So a lot of companies, they say if you put in 5%, they match 5%. Again, you're defining that with a finite number. Okay. All right, so 3 areas of focus really is going to be on time frames. So the first one's going to be your emergency fund. The next one's going to be your short-term savings. Short-term savings is generally from 3 to 5 years. You can go online, they'll have other definitions. It may be 2 to 4, it may be 3 to 6. It's close. The thing is, it's in the near future. It's not decades down the road. That's long-term savings and investments, just generally beyond 5 years. Okay. All right. So short-term savings, this is going to be not just your emergency fund, but also that 3 to 5 year time frame. Will Rogers said this best. I'm not so much interested on the return on my money as I am on the return of my money. I saw this a lot about 10 years ago where you couldn't get any savings in the bank. So you're sitting in a savings account literally earning a whopping 0.5%. That's all that they would pay. money markets and CDs may give you 1%. So what people were doing, they were taking more risk, trying to get a higher rate of return. But the problem you do that is whenever the car breaks down or the air conditioner goes out, you need the money, but that risk didn't work for you. And now instead of having $1,000, you got 750. It doesn't work out that well. Okay. So short-term savings, focus on safety, yield and return, take a back seat. Going to the other side of the spectrum, long-term investments. So rate of return is critical. It's absolutely critical to success. Okay. We'll talk about rates of return here in a moment, but that is the one I think that makes a lot of people uncomfortable going, oh, I've got to take risk. Well, yes, you have to in order to get that longer rate of return, but we'll show in a minute what one of the biggest factors are to make sure that you have a higher success for that rate of return. Okay. Time in the market, not timing the market. Okay. And when I say the market, we mean the stock market. Think of like the S&P 500 or the Dow or the NASDAQ. I've got people right now who have cash off to the side. It's like, well, the S&P 500 was up 25% 2 years ago. It was up 25% last year. Yeah, that's not going to go on forever. So they're like, should I invest? Should I not? There is around about $7 trillion with the T, $7 trillion in money market funds right now. Cash just sitting off to the side. That's not invested. Big number. It's a huge number. Some of it is people saying, I'm kind of nervous to put it in at the market high. All right, so let's talk about compounding. Albert Einstein, pretty smart guy, knows a little bit about math. He even said, hey, it's the 8th wonder of the world. Okay. So this is the way that it works with an example. So let's say you're 20 years old, okay, and you put $200 per month into investments, and you do that for the next 50 years, okay? You don't increase it, you just $200 like clockwork. Let's say you get a 7% annualized rate of return. Quite frankly, my opinion is that's a very realistic long-term assumption. I don't think it's too high, I don't think it's too low. I think it's, for somebody taking some risk, it's legitimate, okay? So at the end of those 50 years, the total value is around about $1 million. But here's the fun thing. You've only put in $120,000 over that entire time frame. So $886,000 of that is through growth. That's the way compounding works. So time in the market. My investment philosophy is not doing day trading. I'm not trying to get in, trying to get out. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, next month, next 6 months. Okay, maybe a broad idea of kind of where things are at, but I don't know with absolute certainty. But when we look historically of the chances of having a positive return over given timeframes, I think it's very telling of what occurs here. So over a one-day period, it's basically a coin toss. If you invest for just one day, you might be up, you might be down. But if you notice you start to stretch out your time frame, the probability of having an up positive return is much higher. So once you stretch it out to 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, and 20 years. Okay. Now, if we've got anybody maybe online, anybody that was investing late 90s, early 2000s, it was a really kind of a nail-biting experience. So I'm gonna have a little feedback here. So between 2000 and 2009, does anybody want to take a guess of what the S&P 500, the U.S. stock market, returned annually during that time frame? 3%. 3%. Okay, 1%. We're getting consensus on one? No? I need one more. I'm okay with silence, so until somebody shouts out a new number. Oh, I like that. You're the first person. Yeah. It was negative 0.95% annualized. That's what I was thinking. For that 10-year time frame. What happened was you had the dot-com bust, things ran back up, and then you had the credit crisis. So when you went from point A to point B, you went nowhere. It's called the lost decade. All right? So let's be fair. The next 10 years from 2010 to the end of 2019, what happened?
Probably exploded.
Okay, let me type that into a calculator. What number? Give me a number.
8.
8 per year. Okay, 2 more guesses.
13.
You cheated, 13.56. Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. So even the patients sometimes, it's like, what I noticed psychologically with the clients is they were fatigued in those first 10 years. They were like, we don't have faith, we don't have hope, nothing's going to happen. And then for the next 10 years, it did really well. So if you average out over those 20-year time frame, what the average rate of return was, it was around about 6%. Okay. Okay, still a little bit lower than the historical average, but over time, it did make up for it. So you're right. We had a nice little rebound in that second decade. All right. So there's a lot of different, let's say, types of investments that are out there, places you can put your money. We're going to do two generic buckets. We're going to have debt. We're going to have equity. Okay. So debt is what you do. You already have the assets. You already have the money, and you loan it to somebody. Okay. And the idea is when you loan them the money, they're going to give you interest back and your principal back after a certain time frame. Okay. Much lower risk, but much lower return over time. Okay. Generally speaking, something is backing you up. So if you loan money to a corporation for a corporate bond, they're building their land, a manufacturing piece of equipment backs up what they borrowed. So if they go out of business, you're first in line to get your money back. Okay? So types of places where you loan your money, like to a bank, a savings account, a checking account, CDs, whatnot, or you can loan your money to the government. You can buy treasury bonds, notes. Okay. All right. So debt, you're loaning your money to somebody. In the end, you get your principal back with some interest. Okay. All right. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got equity. A lot of people call them generally stocks. If we're talking stocks and bonds, it's generally kind of what it falls into. But equity is ownership. You actually own something. So when you have shares or stocks of a company, you actually have a small sliver of ownership of that company. Many times it gives you the voting ability to say, yes, I agree for these people to be on the board of directors, who then hires the CEO, who then hires the managers, who then, guess what, hires you. So you have a say in that a lot of the times. Okay. But other types of ownership, vehicles would be like mutual funds that invest in stocks, ETFs that invest in stocks. And you see through that list different types of way you can own things. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. If we can make that print any smaller, let me know. If we don't have it in the book, I think we got it. Yeah. We've got it in the appendix in the back. So what this is showing is for the past 100 years, what stocks, that's the blue line and the green line toward the top, have done. And then the orange toward the bottom is going to be bonds, government bonds generally. Okay. So if you notice over the past 100 years, generally ownership, stocks have done much better than bonds have. But if you notice, this is on a logarithmic scale, so kind of keep that in mind, you got much choppier with your equities. So you got a much wilder ride, even though the trajectory is a little bit higher. Bonds, on the other hand, orange, a little bit smoother ride, but not as big a return. If you can't read it, for large company stocks, over the past 100 years, they've averaged about 10% per year. Most advisors and analysts I see don't see that happening in the next, let's say, 10, 20 years. I think it's going to be lower. I think it's probably going to be closer to maybe about the 8% range. I've seen some people say as low as 6. Okay. Government bonds did around about 5 per year. Okay. Right. So this risk reward. All right, so we talked about the types of vehicles that we can invest in, the types of investments. Now let's talk about the type of accounts. And what I mean by that is where is the money being held, like at a bank, like in your company 401k or an IRA, and within those you can buy the investments. Okay. Your type of accounts fall into 2 broad categories. You got some without special tax benefits. So that's your checking account, your savings account, just a regular brokerage account. So when those investments spit off a dividend or a capital gain, you have to pay taxes on those each year. Okay. Then you have those with special tax advantages. Think of like, I think you guys have a 403B here, that retirement plan. What happens is that money can grow tax deferred. Okay. IRAs, 529 college savings accounts. There's a special tax benefit to it, but it's very, very rare that Uncle Sam never gives you a tax benefit without a hook. There's generally a hook that goes with it. So You don't have to be book smart just to be street smart. If somebody's saying, hey, there's a tax benefit for it, just say, hey, what's the hook? What goes with it? Okay, you guys are either going to love or hate the next probably 15 minutes. I'm not sure yet. We're going to figure this out together. All right. So we're going to go through IRAs, 529s, a couple of different kinds of accounts. For sake of time, I'm not going to drill down into a lot of the nuances to it. Okay. But it gives you a broad idea of what these are for. All right. So IRAs came into existence in 1974. What was happening is that your companies, think of like what your parents, your grandparents went to work for. You work for that company your whole working life. They take care of you for the rest of their life, right? The old school pensions. Well, those were starting to unwind, not be as popular. So Congress made individual retirement accounts, IRAs, in hopes that you would save money for yourself. So what they did, they said, we're going to put a sweetener in it for you that you get a tax break on the front end and your money goes tax deferred. Okay, so there's the benefit and the hook that go, and I'll tell you the hook in a second. All right. So for 2025, if you meet the requirements for IRAs, you could put in $7,000 if you're under the age of 50. If you're over the age of 50 and older, you can put in $8,000. Okay, but they do have limitations and requirements. Okay? IRAs broadly fit into two categories. You got the traditional IRA and the Roth IRA. Okay, all right. So the traditional IRA came into existence in 1974, and the idea is this: you put money into it, and Uncle Sam says, "Oh, you earned the $8,000 or the $7,000. I'm not going to tax you on that right now." So you get a deduction off your taxes for it. The money grows tax deferred over time, and then when you retire, you start to draw off of that. That's when it becomes taxable. So Uncle Sam's hoping that your money grows really big, so that he'll get a lot more taxes on the back end. Pretty smart. Okay. Then in the late 90s, you had a senator out of Delaware. I believe his name is William Roth. Yeah, William Roth in 1998, he introduced legislation for the Roth IRA. So Roth is only the last name of the senator who introduced the bill. That's where that came from. Okay. So the idea is this, wait a second, we need more tax revenue now. What if people paid taxes up front on their contributions? We as the government still keeps that. And then they put money into the Roth IRA, but it grows tax-free for the rest of their life. So when your $8,000 grows to $800,000, you can take it out later in life and it not be taxed at all, which is phenomenal. I'm a big fan of Roth IRAs, but don't think that they're a silver bullet for everything. Okay, all right. Some people like to promote they're not the silver bullet for everything. Right. Traditional pre-tax, Roth IRA after tax. That's the main concepts. All right. So let's look on the backside of the IRAs. All right. So your traditional IRAs, remember these are for retirement. So Uncle Sam put the age of 59 and a half out there. So if you take the money out before 59 and a half, not only do you pay taxes on your distribution, you also have a 10% penalty. Okay. Now, after the age 59 and a half, you can let go of that 10% penalty. It's just tax at ordinary income. Okay. Now, here's the thing. He's not going to let it sit in there forever. Whenever you hit a certain age, generally between 73 and 75, you have to start taking required minimum distributions. Okay. For a rule of thumb, in your mid-70s, it's around about 4%. Okay. Kind of give you an idea. That's the way Uncle Sam on the back end starts to get his taxes back. Okay. And that percentage gets higher as you get older. Okay. The Roth IRA is a little bit different. Your contributions you put in, let's say you put in $7,000, you can take those out anytime. No taxes, no penalty. Now the earnings, if you take it out where it's got the earnings, your earnings are going to be taxable at ordinary income and a 10% penalty if you do it before 59 and a half. Okay. All right. The other thing is this, is that you got to have the Roth IRA in existence for at least 5 years. Okay. Let me pause real quick. If you go on the internet and you Google a lot of this stuff, be very careful because the information may be wrong. And it's not because it's wrong on the website. It just may be numbers associated with the year 2020 or 2019. Okay. The rules have been changing over time. Required distributions used to be 70 and a half, then they went to 72, then they went to 73 and 75. We got to keep up with all this. Okay. So what I'm saying is when you Google things, be careful and try to find out what the date of the article is where you're going. You want to make sure you got updated information. Okay. Other types of IRAs, they've got something called a spousal IRA. This is more of a special term. It's not a technical term. You will not find this anywhere in the Internal Revenue Code. All this is this. Let's say you got two individuals that are married, and one of the spouses is working and has earned income, but the other one does not have earned income on their own. If this individual earns enough, then they both can put money into IRAs. Hence, the spouse who's not working can put money in their own IRA. That's why they call it the spousal IRA. So don't get thrown for a loop if you see spousal IRA. It's nothing really special, okay? It's just saying that the spouse who's not earning the income can make a contribution. If you inherit an IRA or receive a beneficiary IRA, they have updated the rules over the past couple of years. And they made them a lot more complicated. It's not me. I'm just the bearer of bad news. They changed the law in December of 2019, and I'm not making this up. They just clarified the last part of that law for a beneficiary IRA this past summer. So imagine if in your job, if you can make a rule, but nobody has to interpret it for 4.5 years. That must be really nice, you know? So the key thing to kind of keep in mind, if you think it might apply to you, the year 2019, 2020, that's where the rules start to differ. It's not when the rules did change then, but if somebody died before 2020, they go into the old rules. Okay. All right. Backdoor Roth IRA. If you earn too much money to put contributions directly into a Roth IRA, there is the possibility of being able to still get money into the Roth. What you do, you put money into a traditional, and then turn right back around and convert it to a Roth. Okay, I'm oversimplifying that concept. There's a little bit more to it, so please don't go do it right away. But it is a way, if you're earning more than, I think it's around about $220,000, that you can still get money into a Roth IRA. SEP IRAs and simple IRAs, big picture is this. Those are generally for either self-employed individuals or for smaller companies. Simple IRA is a little bit more affordable and easier to keep track of than a 401k is or a 403b. They have different contribution limits, and you'll see the numbers up there. Okay. One thing to keep in mind, especially if somebody is age 60, 61, 62, or 63. So if you're one of those four ages, they changed the law again where you could even put a little bit more than the normal catch-up contribution. So if you kind of fit into those age groups, just kind of look at that. That just started this year. So again, if you go online, you say, what's my catch-up contribution? You kind of look at what year you're looking at the article. Can we make it more complicated for you? How about that? All right. So we're not trying to intimidate you. We're just trying to expose, trying to educate, just saying, hey, there's avenues out there to put money in. And it's like there may be, in certain situations, ability to put more money into that for savings. Okay. All right. So let's shift from individual retirement accounts and go over to company-sponsored plans. Okay. So the idea, the intent is for long-term retirement savings, just like IRAs are. All right. So a couple of examples up on the board: 401ks, 403bs, 457s, TSPs, et cetera. Okay. Generally, your employers match a contribution. I believe the church does a 3% safe harbor contribution to the 403b. Okay, so that's free money right there. That's being given to you. So I keep that in mind when I put money in the collection plate. I'm kidding. Okay. Y'all are good stewards. That's why I don't feel bad at it. No, you guys do earn it though. I mean, you guys work hard. I mean, I do appreciate you guys. All right. A lot of the times these plans have both pre-tax and Roth contributions. But one thing to keep in mind, they're very similar to IRAs, but they're not the same. Okay. They're not the same. They have different things you can do. The one thing that jumps out to me is this: 401ks will allow you to borrow against the 401k plan. IRAs, you generally can't. You got a little nuance you can do, but I'm not going to go down that road. Okay. So it's kind of your differences. When you leave your employer or leave your job, you generally have the option to roll your 401k or 403b into an IRA if you want. There are some professionals that advocate that's the way to go. It's an option, okay? Or you can roll into your new company's 401k or 403b. So one thing to notice whenever we're talking about contributions, your limits are a lot higher. So your IRA limits, will say the maximum for anybody under the age of 57 grand is $7,000, okay? But once you go into the 401k world, you can jump it up to a lot more. $23,500. And then you can put even more for catch-up contributions. And if the employer is putting more money in, total combined between both of you can do $70,000. Seven Simple have their own little nuances that goes with it. Just in case for the year 2026, just giving you a heads up, if you are doing catch-up contributions and your prior year's earnings, what you made as an income is $145,000 or more, you're forced to make your catch-up contributions as Roth contributions. So that's a change that's coming down the road. A lot to keep up with. But that's why you got the book. You don't even have to write all this down. There you go. All right. All right. Any questions on the retirement savings plans on those? Okay, so shifting gears from your normal employee deferred plans, you've got other types of company savings plans, pensions, employee stock plans, and you'll see the other ones that's listed up there. Generally, those are special incentives for some employees, and some of them are for your more highly compensated executives. Okay. All right. Education savings accounts, so better known as 529 accounts. By the way, where do they come up with these names of these things? 529s, 401ks, 403bs. It's terrible. Basically, it's just the sections of the Internal Revenue Code. That's it. That's where they get their fancy names. Except for Roth. I mean, he's got an ego. He's got to say, I'm the Roth IRA. All right. Okay. The intent for 529 accounts are educational cost. That's the main idea that's for them. You can use them for tuition for kindergarten through 12th grade, for college, not just college, but trade school apprenticeships. I mean, they're pretty broad, but they're not all encompassing. Please don't expect these to be all encompassing. Tuition, room and board, lab fees, computers. Let's say that your major is photography. You can go buy a camera and use the money for it as long as it's associated with a degree. Okay. And there are international universities that you can use the 529 plans for. Okay. So the idea is this, is that you put money into the 529 plan, and the money, you don't really get a tax benefit from, you don't get a tax benefit from the federal level. From the state level, you get a little bit of a state tax benefit. State of Arkansas, if you're married filing jointly, you could put $10,000 into a 529 and deduct that off your taxes. Okay. So it's better than nothing, but it's not as big as getting the federal deduction. The money grows at least tax deferred. So if you have dividends and capital gains over time, you don't have to pay taxes on that. And then if you use them for qualified education expenses on the back end, it's tax-free. Okay. The rule was updated last year, and I got to apologize to Ray and Don on this one. It's not in your book, but it's in the red on there. So if you want to scribble that in, you can. They updated it where now, if you've got money left in a 529, you can actually roll up to $35,000 into a Roth IRA for the benefit of the child. Okay, which is nice.
I think that's what we have for our child. If they don't end up going to school or college, then what happens to that? Like if it's meant for educational costs, but they decide I'm going to be an artist, or I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Anybody watching online is an artist. All right. Anyway. Okay. No. Good question. The question for edification of the people online is, what if you don't use the money? Then what? Well, one benefit about 529 is you never have a required distribution, so you're never forced to liquidate it, which is great. What we see a lot of our clients use is that they just sit on that and then hoping for the next generation, like for their grandchildren or great-grandchildren. So you can't hand it down that way. Another thing that they just introduced is rolling it to a Roth. There are hooks that go along with that. You can only do so much per year, and they're still working out the rules on that too. Okay. Yes, yeah, it'll probably change. Also, one of the benefits is that you can move money between 529s to relatives as long as they're no further than first cousins. So I came from Mississippi. I'm gold. I mean, we got the whole state covered. We're good. Yeah. But I can't do the Arkansas joke because I'm in Arkansas now. But the thing is, you can move and change it around if you need to. So if you've got cousins or a sibling that needs help, you can transfer some of that over. Good question.
Did you say that the Roth IRA though has to be for the child, not
The beneficiary, yes. Yeah. Yep. Has to be for the beneficiary. Yep. So 529s are not the end all be all for everything education related. I'll give you one example that I've tried personally. Try to use it for continuing education cost. It depends on the provider. Here's your litmus test. If you've got any question, call up the provider, the educational provider, and say, do you guys accept 529 money? If they say emphatically yes, you know that they're covered. If they're like, I don't know, let me check into it, odds are they probably don't. That's the quick and dirty way, but give you that. All right. Other ways to say for education accounts or custodial accounts or the UTMA accounts or covered Ls. People don't really use covered Ls much anymore just because the limits are so low and 529 is a little bit better. Other investment type accounts, shifting gears here to health savings accounts. So if you have a high deductible health insurance plan, a health savings account is a way that you can make contributions into that. They can be triple tax efficient. What does that mean? Money going into it is not taxed. The money grows potentially tax free. Then if you take it out for qualified medical expenses, it comes out tax free also. So let's say you put money into a health savings account over time and you let it grow, but you don't really need it. If you notice tucked in there, it says if you're 65 and older, you don't have to use it for qualified medical expenses. Okay. And if you don't, it's just taxed as ordinary income coming out. So it's kind of like a stealth way to have another IRA that's out there. A couple of years ago, they introduced the ABLE account, and the idea is to have money saved for those with disabilities. I'm going to be upfront with you. I'm not very familiar with those. Okay. Right now, the age for those is a little bit young for the distributions, but they're bumping it up to 46 in next year. All right, everybody got the filled out? Types of investments, we have annuities. The idea with an annuity is that you give an insurance company a lump of money, and what they do in return is to give you a stream of income for the rest of your life. The big idea is that another entity is taking the risk of loss on their shoulders as opposed to you. Okay. My biggest piece of advice is this: they come in all flavors, all styles, all types, and every year they change. And every company's one has a little whistle or shiny thing that goes with it. Just be careful that you understand it when you walk into it, if it's something that you look at, because they can be complex. I have seen people use cash value life insurance as an investment type also. Remember, this is just education in nature. I'm not saying do this, don't do that. Just an education. All right. Okay, we're going to shift over to the actual planning side of things, but any other questions on the investment accounts or investment types? Okay. All right. Okay, so you got an idea of kind of vaguely what's out there, the types of accounts and the investment vehicles themselves. There's a plethora of those, but let's say you want to attack this. There's generally about three ways you can go about it. You can do it yourself. Okay, you just pick and build your own investment portfolio. You can do it yourself with a little bit of help. So you go out there and get it subscribed to a newsletter or use a robo-advisor to come and give you a little bit of guidance, but you're still the ones pushing the button. You're just getting advice from a newsletter or whatnot. And then number three, the advisors, somebody using a financial advisor like myself. Okay, so you have an agreement to handle the investing for you. Okay. Can people do it on their own? Absolutely. If you've got the time, the temperament, the technology to do it, no problem at all. You can. I'm a mere mortal. Okay, I somehow I do it every day. I mean, you can do this, but it's like there's other things I can do that I just choose not to because you've got experts who do it. It's a personal choice that you have. Okay. Okay. If you choose to use somebody, here's some piece of advice. The biggest thing is this: your money is always your responsibility. Even though you hire somebody to make the investment decisions to help you out, you still need to watch over it. You still need to glance at it on occasion. Okay. Ask questions. We're going to get into this in a moment, but if you're asking questions of an advisor and they just don't want to answer the question, it's probably not the right advisor for you. Okay. That's a big red flag. All right. Here, let me go back real quick. Three main questions I want my clients to be able to ask me is this: what am I investing in? Why am I investing in that? How do I get paid? That's about the core of what you can do. So if you can answer those three questions to whoever you're working with, you got a pretty good idea if they're pulling on the same side of the rope. So I'll repeat them one more time. What am I investing in? Why am I investing in that? And how do I, as the advisor, get compensated? So talking about working with an advisor, most important aspect is the relationship. Okay. There's a lot of really good advisors out there, and there are some that are so-so. That's in any profession. I don't care if we're talking about doctors, attorneys, whatever. That's just human nature. Okay. All right. There are some really sharp guys that are out there, and ladies too. Don't mean to pigeonhole this. There's a lot of sharp people out there, but some of them just they're dry as a piece of toast, or they're just not fun to work with. They're just not enjoyable. So you can find somebody that's got both competency and a personality. That can work. That can happen. Okay. Find somebody with the heart of a teacher. That's a Dave Ramsey quote, I believe. I agree with that completely. Again, if you can answer those three questions, that's the heart of a teacher. They're trying to teach you that. Okay. But here's the thing, on the other side of that, you've got to have the heart of a student. You've got to be able to willing to learn. Okay. You just can't abdicate. It's like, hey, they told me to do it and that's it. You've got some skin in the game too. All right. Use someone you trust. How do you find that out? The biggest one's referrals. Ask family, ask friends, like, who do you use? What do you like? What do you not like? Have you used other people in the past? Why are you not using them? Just talk. Most people are pretty open to sharing that. Okay. They should have a fiduciary duty. So when we say fiduciary duty, that simply means they're putting your interest above your own, putting your interest above their own. Okay. All right. So avoid advisors who are trying to sell you something. It's like, ooh, hey, this, closes on Friday. We need to get a decision. If you're feeling the pressure, there's nothing I bumped into that's like such a great opportunity. You got to have it just at that moment. Okay. Don't feel the pressure. Right? They don't disclose how much money they make from you, and they don't tell you how they make their money. They just don't have any interest in teaching you. They're more prescriptive in nature. They just say, do this and go. You probably want to avoid those. Now, over time, when you develop the relationship and the trust and you call them up, it eventually gets to that point because you trust individuals. Like, hey, what do you recommend? Say, hey, I like this because A, B, and C. And they're like, okay. That's the way the relationship generally evolves over years. But on the front end, you got to take time. You got this in your book, some areas to look for, like financial advisors. You can go to kingdomadvisors.com. They're going to be Christian focused, Christian based. The National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, they are a fee only. I'll get into that in a second, what that means. Okay. They may not have the Christian focus that the Kingdom Advisors does, but with the fee only is that they're only getting paid for the work they do for you at that moment. Okay. But there are resources that you can go and search through on those to find somebody. Okay. FINRA is our regulatory agency that watches over me. Like today, whenever I'm doing this presentation through my firm, I had to submit that I'm giving this talk so that if somebody goes out of here and says, well, Daryl guaranteed 20% rates of return, and then they go tell everybody, well, they can come back to me. It's like, hey, what happened? Who was in that room? They can find out, and figure things out. Okay. All right. Commission, fee-based or fee only. All right. Commission's your old school. Okay. So let's say you wanted to buy a stock. Sure thing. I get a commission. Click. Hey, I want to sell that stock. Okay. I still get a commission. Me as the advisor, I'm getting paid on either way. It doesn't matter if that stock went up or went down. That's your old school commission round. Not many people do that anymore. What they do, they either do fee-based or fee only. Sounds very similar, but they are distinctly different. So fee-based, the easy way to remember this, it's a percentage of the assets under management. So if they're charging 1% on $100,000, they're getting paid $1,000. Okay. Generally speaking, with that is if your account goes up and they're still charging 1%, guess what? They get paid more. If your account goes down, they still get paid 1%, their compensation gets less. So if you think about it, they're pulling on the same side of the rope as you, because the more money you make over time, the more money they make also. Okay. All right. Then you have fee only. So fee only is basically, think of it like charging by the hour. So you sit down with them and say, hey, I want you to work up a plan and work up a portfolio recommendation for me. They're like, okay, it'll take 3, 4, 5 hours. They tell you how much per hour. That's kind of what your bill is. And that's it. If you want to go back and revisit with them, okay, it's more billable hours. Is that a bad thing? No, not necessarily, because you may not have a very complex situation. You just want to bounce it off somebody that can give you the direction to go and run from there. When you're looking at advisors, identify a handful, go interview them, find one that fits. We talked about that early. You want somebody that you can make that connection with. Okay? If you don't find one, just keep searching. By the way, you're not limited to just the local area. I've got clients in New Hampshire, Florida, Southern California, Idaho, 60 miles away from the Canadian border. I've got them all over the country. Okay? So don't think that you're just stuck here in the area. All right, so we're going to put this all together. So we're going to talk about investment planning and then financial planning. So when you're doing investment planning, it really does help if you've got a written investment plan, okay? And it describes your financial goals and the investment strategy. And I'm going to make one up just generically. Please don't make this your investment plan, okay? So I'm going to invest in the S&P 500 index for the next 20 years by depositing $200 a month into it. The reason being, notice this is very key, the reason being is that historically the S&P 500 has had an average of, call it 10% per year, okay? Even though we've had ups and downs. So what's going to occur is this: whenever you have that 2008 or 2001 downturn and things are down 20, 30, 40%, you're going to say, hey, I'm focusing on the long term. It'll help relieve some of that stress. So that's your second bullet point there. It's that reference point to come back to. Because I guarantee you, every time we have big down markets, and generally during election cycles, that's when our clients are calling us the most. They are. That's because when things get nervous, people are kind of unnerved during those times. All right. So financial planning. So what that's going to be is this: is taking a look at your income, your assets, your liabilities, estate planning, your charitable gifting, taxes, how all those things kind of wrap together, okay, to make sure you're on track to meet those goals. Okay. And to make sure you're using the most tax efficient accounts possible. All right. Any questions so far? Cool. All right. So starting to wrap this up, wrapping back around to the biblical standpoint, it's a balance at the end of the day in regards to saving so that you've got enough for your emergency fund so that you could take care of your family, you could take care of the kids. But at the same point, where you're not hoarding things. Okay, so if you see your two verses up there, Proverbs versus Luke, where, hey, empty shelves is kind of foolish, but at the same point, it's like, why are you hoarding all this stuff? Are you using some of your assets and your gifts to benefit others? It's balance. Okay. All right. I think we all, at the end of the day, want to have the well done, good, and faithful servant. I would hope so. If not, maybe not in the right class, but but I think that's what we want to hear. All right. So 3 questions that we've kind of learned through some of these books and the Generosity Roundtable we're on. There's something called finish lines. It's like, how much is enough? How do you quantify that? So how much is enough for us, for me and my wife? Then how much is enough for my children to make sure that they've got a good starting point, launching into life? Maybe I want to support them through college or whatnot. Well, after I've kind of met those goals, we'll say it's $100,000 or $10 million, whatever it might be. Then what I do? What am I doing with the rest of that? Can I help, more into charitable causes? Do I double my giving? Where would I go? If you guys remember all the way going back, I think it was lesson 1 where we had the video of God's pie. You guys remember that one? Okay, that's it. So that's what he's really focusing on because he's watching what you do. All right. So that's what we've got for today. You did session 5. Good work. Awesome. Any questions? It was a lot. I think we have, I can't believe we did it. We still have 5 minutes left on. I have never done that. So most of the time they go about 1 hour 15. But then again, we got a lot of questions. People like to pepper us with questions. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to stick around for Don's session 2, and then I'll be around afterwards if you got questions. So thank you.
Awesome.